Sir, I'm going to need you to come with me. The gate agent didn't look up when she said it. She was already reaching for the radio on her belt. Already stepping forward. Already close enough that the man in 2A could smell her perfume and the coffee she hadn't finished. Around her, 2 airport security officers had moved into position. One on the aisle, one at the rear door of the jetway. The other passengers had not yet noticed. The boarding process was still underway. Carry-ons were being lifted. Overhead bins were clicking shut. "Is there a problem?" the man asked. He was in the first row. Business class. Window seat. He had said almost nothing since boarding 40 minutes ago, had nodded to the flight attendant, accepted a glass of water, opened a thin manila folder of documents, and begun to read. He was wearing a navy sport coat over a gray shirt. No tie, no uniform. "We've had a concern raised," the gate agent said. "If you'll just come with me." "What concern?" She leaned in. "Sir, I need you to lower your voice." He hadn't raised it. The man in 2A had the kind of voice that didn't need raising. Deep and controlled. The voice of someone who had spent decades making decisions in rooms where the cost of uncertainty was measured in lives. He closed the folder and looked at her directly. "What concern has been raised?" he said. "And by whom?" She hesitated. Then the taller of the 2 security officers stepped forward, a broad man in his late 30s, badge number 7741, name tag reading Kowalski, and he put his hand on the man's shoulder. "I need you to come with us now," Kowalski said. "Remove your hand." "Sir, remove your hand." Kowalski didn't remove it. He gripped tighter, pulled, and the man in 2A was on his feet. Not because he chose to stand, but because the officer yanked him upright by the collar of his sport coat, stepped backward into the aisle, and pulled him stumbling forward in front of 47 watching passengers. A child in row 4 made a sound. A woman in a window seat pressed herself against the fuselage. A man in a business suit watched from row 6, with a small approving tilt of his head, and did nothing else. A teenage boy in the back raised his phone and began recording, whispering something to the girl beside him that made her laugh. No one intervened. The man in 2A did not fight. He did not shout. He kept his hands up and visible, palms open, fingers spread. The choreography of survival that no one teaches you formally, but that black men in America learn through some combination of instruction, observation, and terror. He was counting, not out loud, in his head. 1. Unauthorized physical removal of a seated passenger. 2. No verbal warning issued before physical contact. 3. No articulation of probable cause. 4. No supervisor present. He had been counting since the gate agent appeared, and he was already at 4 before they reached the jetway door. He had no idea that what Officer Kowalski had just done would be the last law enforcement action of his career. He would never put on a badge again. And neither would 11 other people. In exactly 22 minutes, a single phone call would go through to the Pentagon. And that call would end everything. But this story doesn't start here. Rewind 14 hours. The man in 2A had been awake since 4:15 in the morning. That was standard. Had been standard for 41 years, ever since a drill sergeant at Fort Benning, Georgia, had decided that the skinny kid from Memphis who wanted to be an engineer would become something else entirely. The drill sergeant's name was DuPont. He was not a kind man. He was, however, exactly right. That skinny kid from Memphis had become something else entirely. His name was General Marcus R. Caldwell, 3-star general, Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations, United States Army. 41 years of service, 14 combat deployments, 2 Presidential Unit citations, the Distinguished Service Medal with 2 oak leaf clusters, and a reputation inside the Pentagon so specific and well documented that his name was one of the first three called in any operational crisis that involved coordination between branches. He was 61 years old. He had a bad left knee from a fall in Kandahar in 2009 that he had never fully acknowledged. He had a daughter at Georgetown studying public policy and a son who was a pediatric cardiologist in Atlanta. He had a wife, Dr. Renee Caldwell, who was a retired federal judge with 30 years on the bench, who had seen enough systemic failure in her courtroom that she had written a book about it, a book that had spent 7 weeks on the New York Times nonfiction list. That morning, Marcus Caldwell had driven himself to the airport in a 10-year-old Chevrolet Tahoe that needed new brake pads. He had parked in the economy lot because that was where he always parked. He had carried a single roller bag and his manila folder of documents, the latest operational readiness briefings he was flying to review with the Joint Chiefs in Washington. He had passed through security in 7 minutes, bought a black coffee, and boarded early because of his frequent flyer status. He was, by every observable measure, a passenger. Airport police officer Dennis Kowalski had been with the force for 11 years. He had 11 commendations and a 2-time Officer of the Year award for the Regional Tri-County Authority. His photograph was on the recruiting website beneath the words, "Proud to Protect." His captain, a man named Gerald Finn, had known Kowalski for 8 of those 11 years and had, on 4 separate occasions, personally intervened in complaint proceedings against him. There were 19 filed complaints in Kowalski's record. 19. Ranging from excessive force to racial intimidation to an incident at a rental car counter that 3 witnesses described identically and that Finn had managed to reclassify as a misunderstanding. The complaints had been investigated by Internal Affairs. Internal Affairs reported to Finn. The math was not complicated. The concern that had been raised, the concern the gate agent had cited, had come from the man in row 6. His name was not recorded because he gave a false name at the gate desk and then deplaned before anyone could speak with him again. What he had said at the desk, in a low and certain voice, was this: the man in 2A had been acting suspiciously, and he thought they should check on him. The gate agent had called for security. Kowalski had responded. That was the entire chain of events. A false name. A phone call. Kowalski's hands. What none of them knew. Not the gate agent. Not Kowalski. Not Captain Finn, who was already on his way to the airport after Kowalski radioed it in, pleased with himself, was that the man in 2A had made one phone call before they put him in the security office. One call. He had made it the same way he did everything. Calmly, specifically, and with complete knowledge of what the call would set in motion. 22 minutes. They put him in a room the size of a large closet with 2 chairs, a bolted table, and a fluorescent light that buzzed. Kowalski sat across from him. A second officer stood by the door. The gate agent had returned to her desk. Through the narrow window, Marcus Caldwell could see the plane he was supposed to be on, still at the gate. "You want to tell me what you were doing on that aircraft?" Kowalski said. "Traveling," General Caldwell said. "Business or pleasure?" "Official business." Kowalski wrote something. "You work for the government?" "I do." "Doing what?" Caldwell said nothing for a moment. He was looking at Kowalski with the specific patience of someone who has spent 41 years assessing people in compressed time frames and has never once misjudged what he was looking at. What he was looking at, he had decided in the first 40 seconds, was not a dangerous man. It was a protected man. There was a difference. Dangerous men acted from desperation. Protected men acted from permission. The most important thing about Dennis Kowalski was not what he believed. It was that an entire institutional infrastructure had told him, 19 times across 11 years, that his beliefs were correct. "I need to see your ID," Kowalski said. Caldwell removed his wallet, produced a card, slid it across the table. Kowalski looked at it. His expression did not change in any way that could be described as recognition. Department of Defense, he said. Correct. This doesn't tell me what you do. No, Caldwell agreed. It doesn't. Kowalski leaned back. See, the problem I have is a credible report. From a man who gave a false name and then left the airport. Kowalski stopped. How do you know? Because I've been watching how this works for 41 years, Caldwell said. He folded his hands on the table. Are you going to charge me with something, Officer Kowalski? Or is this a detention without cause? It's a welfare check. A welfare check conducted by physical removal of a seated passenger. Kowalski's jaw tightened. You resisted. I have a video, Caldwell said. 47 passengers. One teenager in the back row who has almost certainly already uploaded it. He paused. That's my estimate. I could be wrong. 12 minutes now. In the airport parking structure, a black SUV with government plates had just pulled in. In Washington, D.C., a call had connected. The person who answered it had listened for 40 seconds, asked 3 questions, and then said the words that would take the rest of the day to fully uncoil. I'll handle it personally. The door opened. Captain Gerald Finn walked in, looking the way men look when they have spent the drive to the airport convincing themselves they can manage something that has already escaped management. He was a heavy-set man in his 50s, with a thick mustache, and the permanently slightly red complexion of someone who ate badly and slept less than he should. He looked at Kowalski first. Then he looked at the man across the table. Something shifted in Finn's face. It was small, and it happened fast, and he covered it with a practiced expression of administrative calm. But it was there. The flicker of someone who recognized, or almost recognized, and wasn't sure if that recognition was going to help him or bury him. I'm Captain Finn, he said. I apologize for any inconvenience. Are you releasing me? Caldwell asked. I just want to make sure we have a clear picture, Captain. Caldwell's voice did not rise. It became quieter, actually, the way a room gets quiet when something important is about to happen. I have been physically removed from a commercial aircraft without cause, detained in a room without charge, and questioned for 14 minutes on the basis of an unverified report from a person who gave a false name. I have counted 9 separate violations of federal civil rights statute, airport authority policy, and SA protocol. I would like to know if I am being released or if I am being held. Finn opened his mouth. The door opened again. The man who came through it was in uniform, full Army service uniform, green coat, brass, ribbons, the works. Colonel Terrence Ames, Deputy Inspector General for the Department of the Army, based at the Pentagon, who had driven 40 minutes in 22 minutes to stand in a closet-sized room at a regional airport and personally escort a 3-star general out of a detention he should never have been placed in. Ames was 38 years old and looked at the way men look when they have spent their career doing things correctly. He carried a folder. The folder had official letterhead visible on the top sheet. He looked at Captain Finn with an expression that wasn't anger and wasn't contempt. It was something more like clarity, the look of a man reading a document he already knows the contents of. Captain, he said, I'm Colonel Ames. I think you want to call your department's legal counsel. Finn stared at him. I'm sorry, who now, Ames said, before you say anything else. Finn looked at Kowalski. Kowalski was looking at the man across the table. The man across the table had not moved, had not changed his expression, had not done anything that could be described on video as anything other than calm. He was waiting. My name, the man said, is Marcus R. Caldwell. He said it the way he said everything, without performance, without satisfaction, with the quiet weight of someone who has spent 4 decades earning every syllable of what comes next. 3-star General, Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations, United States Army, I have 41 years of service. I have 14 combat deployments. I have 2 presidential unit citations. He stood up. He adjusted the collar of his sport coat where Kowalski had gripped it. I was on my way to a briefing with the Joint Chiefs. And you have just made that briefing considerably more complicated. He looked at Kowalski, not with anger, with the specific measurement of a man cataloging exactly what he is looking at. You have no idea, he said, what you've just done. The color left Kowalski's face like something had been turned off. One Pentagon call, Caldwell said quietly. That's all this took. He picked up his folder from the table. I'd suggest you call your union representative. He walked out. What happened next took 72 hours to fully complete, but it had the feel of something that had been building for 11 years and simply needed the right weight to come down. The teenager's video went up at 11:47 a.m. By 2 p.m., it had 400,000 views. By 6 p.m., it had crossed 2 million. The angle was perfect, shot from the rear of the cabin. Clear view of Kowalski's hand on the collar. Clear audio of the man in 2A saying, "Remove your hand," twice, clearly, calmly, to no effect. The comments section was 47,000 entries deep before the platform's moderation algorithms began slowing the traffic. The video did not say who the man was. It didn't need to. By 4 p.m., 3 separate journalists had the name. By 7 p.m., there were news vans outside the Regional Airport Authority's main office. Colonel Ames had been busy since before the vans arrived. The folder he'd carried into that room contained a formal complaint, filed under his authority as Deputy IG, that activated a parallel track of investigation that Captain Finn's chain of command could not touch. The complaint named Kowalski. It named Finn. It named the Internal Affairs Office that had reviewed and dismissed 19 prior complaints. It named the procedure by which those dismissals had been authorized. It was, by every legal measure, airtight, because Ames had spent 6 months building a file on Kowalski's pattern before this morning, and this morning had given him the case he needed. Kowalski was placed on administrative leave before end of business. Finn was placed on administrative leave the following morning. By the end of the second day, the Regional Tri-County Airport Authority's board had convened an emergency session. Their legal counsel had reviewed the video, reviewed the complaint, reviewed the 19 prior complaints, and advised them in clear and unambiguous language that their institution's exposure was not a matter of if, but of how much. The captain who had covered for Kowalski for 8 years submitted his resignation. It was accepted within the hour. The federal investigation opened on the morning of the 3rd day. It absorbed the airport authority's internal review, expanded it, and began pulling threads that led in directions no one at the authority had anticipated. 4 more officers in Kowalski's unit were found to have participated in, witnessed, or been the subject of complaints that had been improperly handled. Their cases were referred. Their badges were surrendered. A senior administrator, who had approved Finn's internal affairs appointments, resigned citing personal reasons. The head of the Internal Affairs Office itself, the man who had signed off on 19 dismissals, was put under investigation for misconduct in office. 12 careers. 12 people who had been inside the system that told Dennis Kowalski 19 times that he was right. None of it happened neatly. None of it happened without resistance. 3 of the 12 retained attorneys who challenged the scope of the investigation, and those challenges were still pending at the time of this telling. Kowalski himself pled to a reduced charge in federal court, 2 years probation, permanent bar from law enforcement employment, restitution ordered. His union, to the surprise of several of its own members, declined to fully fund his defense after the 19th complaint record became public record. His smirk, in the video, is the thing people remember. The way he pulled the collar, the way he didn't hear what he was told. Dr. Renee Caldwell had been in her home office in Arlington when her husband called. She had been reviewing a manuscript. She was working on a second book, this one about evidentiary standards and wrongful conviction. She had heard exactly 40 seconds of what her husband said before she stood up, walked to her filing cabinet, removed a specific folder she maintained for exactly this category of situation, and began making calls of her own. She called 3 former colleagues on the federal bench. She called the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. She called a journalist she had known for 20 years who covered civil rights law. She called her husband's aide-de-camp, who was already coordinating with Ames. She made each call in under 3 minutes. She did not cry. She did not raise her voice. She pressed record on her phone before the third call and kept it running. When a reporter called her for comment that evening, she said 6 words: documentation wins. Emotion loses. Evidence is everything. It became the caption on the most shared graphic of the week. General Caldwell gave one statement. He gave it at a podium set up in a conference room at the Pentagon, flanked by no one, no aide, no attorney, no family. He had written it himself the night before in a hotel room in Washington because he had missed his flight. He spoke for 7 minutes. He said, "I am not sharing this because I want sympathy. I am sharing it because most people in my position, people who experience what I experienced, do not have the institutional access, the professional standing, or the personal documentation to ensure accountability follows. That asymmetry is the problem, not Dennis Kowalski. Kowalski is a symptom. The system that put 19 complaints in a drawer is the diagnosis." He said, "Someone will ask why I didn't identify myself sooner, and the answer is the same answer that every black person in America who has been in that position already knows. If I have to announce my rank, my medals, and my 41 years of service to be treated with basic dignity, then the system is already broken. The dignity should not be conditional on the credential. The man behind me on that plane, in row 8, in his 30s, carrying a guitar, he deserves the same courtesy I was denied. He does not have 3 stars on his shoulder. He is still a human being on his way somewhere. He still matters." He paused. He looked at the cameras. The law must be accountable to the people it claims to protect. When it isn't, when badges become shields for contempt, someone has to say so. Someone has to be watching. He gathered his papers. He walked out without taking questions. Dennis Kowalski served 11 months of his probationary sentence before a technical violation returned him to court for a sentencing review. His appeal on the federal charge was denied. He permanently surrendered his law enforcement certification. He owes $114,000 in restitution that, as of this telling, he has paid in partial installments. He no longer appears on the recruiting website. Gerald Finn lost his pension in the federal proceeding. He is contesting that ruling. The Regional Airport Authority's insurer settled with General Caldwell's attorneys out of court for an amount that has not been publicly disclosed, but that several legal analysts described as significant. The Internal Affairs Office that reviewed Kowalski's 19 complaints was dissolved and replaced with an independent oversight board. 3 civilian members, 2 of whom were chosen from community organizations. The appointment was not celebrated widely. It was noted. Colonel Ames was promoted. The promotion had been in process before the incident. He is now, appropriately, a general officer himself, 1 star. He and Marcus Caldwell see each other at Joint Chiefs briefings and do not discuss the airport. The teenager who filmed the video, his name was never made public because he was a minor, made a single public statement through his mother. He said he hadn't known what to do, so he filmed it. He said he was glad. He said he had enrolled in his school's civic engagement program the following semester. His statement was 3 sentences. He did not frame it as heroism. He said, "I saw something. I did what I could. I think that's what you're supposed to do." The man in the business suit in row 6, the one who watched and nodded, was identified by 2 other passengers. He has never made a statement. His employer, a regional logistics firm, issued a press release 2 weeks after the video circulated, stating that the company did not endorse discrimination of any kind. The press release was 4 paragraphs. He was not named in it. The man in row 8, with the guitar, flew the same route the following week. He was not stopped. He was not questioned. He sat in his seat and listened to music through his headphones and looked out the window. No one noticed him. He did not know, has never been told, that a man in a Navy sport coat had stood in a closet-sized room and spoken his name. Marcus Caldwell retired from the Army 14 months after the airport incident, on schedule, at the conclusion of his final tour. His retirement ceremony was at Fort Myer. 600 people attended. His daughter read a passage he had chosen. His wife sat in the front row and looked the way people look when they are proud of something that also cost them something. He and Renee drive to the farmer's market on Saturday mornings. He still has the bad left knee. He never fully acknowledged it, and he never will. In the evenings, sometimes, he sits on the porch and reads the operational briefings he no longer has to act on. He reads them the way a doctor reads case files after they've retired, with the particular attention of someone who cannot stop knowing what they know. Sometimes Renee brings coffee and sits beside him, and they talk in the low, easy way of people who have talked through the hard versions of everything and have arrived, not at peace exactly, but at something that functions like it. "You think it changed anything?" she asked him once, in the first weeks after the statement. He thought about it the way he thought about everything. Specifically, without sentiment, with the discipline of 41 years of turning hard questions into accurate answers. 12 careers, he said. 1 oversight board. 19 complaints on the record now instead of in a drawer. He turned a page. That's not fixed. That's a start. He looked out at the street. Someone has to be watching, he said, until the system makes it unnecessary. Someone has to keep watching. If this story made you feel something, anger, or recognition, or the need to think, share it with someone who deserves to hear it. Because stories like Marcus Caldwell's don't spread themselves. We spread them. Together, drop a comment below. Have you ever had to choose between speaking up and staying safe? And what did that moment cost you? Subscribe for more stories that name the truth and honor the people who refuse to look away. Because every view is a vote for accountability, and every share tells the algorithm that this is the kind of story that matters.